Hello, everybody. Happy Friday, and welcome into a new edition of the Patriots Beat podcast here on the CLNS Media Podcast Network. I'm Evan Lazar, joined as always by Alex Barth. And Alex, to start today's show, before we really get into the weeds of this matchup, because this is, for me, one of the best chess matches that we're going to get all year long. You probably could have guessed that I'm a big Brandon Staley fan, and we're going to get into some of the things that the Chargers are going to do defensively against the Patriots here in a second. But right off the top, 40% chance, according to Football Outsiders, currently for the Patriots to make the playoffs in 2021. 40%. So we're saying
path math right now.
So we're doing path math because we're saying there's a chance, right? There is a chance at 3-4 that the Patriots can rattle off some wins here in the back half of their schedule and make the playoffs. Now, although there's a chance, it feels like it has to start with the Jets game last week, catapulting them to pulling off what I would call, even though it's 4.5, the line right now, an upset over the Chargers in a pretty good team in LA, out in LA in their building.
Here's the thing. You can make a convincing case that the Patriots should win their next 5 games. I think that there's also a case that the Patriots end up losing their next 5 games.
Right.
And the Chargers, Panthers, Browns, Falcons, and Titans. This is it. This stretch, they got to get through this stretch. I'll say 4-1. If they get through the stretch 4-1, then they go to Buffalo on a Monday night, first week in December, and that's a ball game. That is, all of a sudden, we're talking about the division. Because the Bills' schedule is kind of easy between now and then. They got the Dolphins. It's actually really easy. I didn't realize how easy it was. They got the Dolphins, the Jaguars, the Jets, and the Colts, and then finally the Saints before they play the Patriots. But it's more,
Bills are really easy.
Right. It's more than the Bills. It's a wild card, right? You're playing the Chargers. Yeah. That's potentially going to be a wild card team. You're playing the Titans. That's probably not going to be a wild card team, but potentially going to be a wild card team. Browns probably, if they want to make it, that's a wild card team. The Chargers potentially are a wild card team. This is it. These next 5 games, that game in Buffalo has to matter one way or the other if they want a shot at the playoffs. If that game doesn't matter, they're out. No duh. So I think they got to go 4-1 through the stretch, really, for us to seriously be talking about at that Buffalo game, okay, playoffs. And I think they can do it. That's not to say they can't do it. I think they can do it. But this is it right here. This is the season, these next 5 games.
Absolutely. And it's set up nicely for them. The Patriots have the 11th easiest strength of schedule for the next 9 games.
They got some help with some injuries here and there. But
they got some injury help, and they have the Jags on the schedule. The Dolphins now aren't as good as they used to be. Atlanta's on the schedule, which is a very winnable game. The Colts are a very, very winnable team. And the 11th easiest strength of schedule is factoring in that they have Buffalo twice, who currently is number 1 in DVOA. So if you take those matchups against the Bills out and you just look at the other 7 games that the Patriots have left here, it is a very much easier. Or they have 7, 9, right? Or
so what I would say is I gave
those game is killing me. Yeah.
I gave those 5 games that are crucial right here. Chargers, Panthers, Browns, Falcons, Titans. Here's their last 5. Bills, Colts, Bills, Jaguars, Dolphins. So 3 of those are winnable. Let's say they can split with the Bills.
Right.
Let's say they can split with the Bills. There's 4-1. So 4-1 plus 3-4 right now. That's 7-5. So you're, let's say, and maybe I'm giving them too much splitting with the Bills. But let's say things fall away at the beginning and the end of the schedule, right? You're 7-5. Those last 5 games, if you go for those middle 5 games, right? You go 4-1, you're in really good shape. Now you're 11-6. That should be a playoff team.
Yeah, basically the point of me bringing this up, and then we're going to get into this matchup, is that teams have gone from 3-4 to the playoffs a ton in the course of NFL history. You always hear about those statistical trends about, if you start 0-2, you're finished, right? When you start 3-4, you're definitely not finished. A lot of teams do this. A lot of teams turn their season around at the midway point, start playing their best football, and move forward. The 54-13 beatdown of the Jets aside, that needs to be the springboard into what's coming up next here against the Los Angeles Chargers. Looking at this matchup against...
So hang on, do you want the actual percentage?
Of teams that make the play? Sure, yeah, give it to me.
The average finish is 7-9, but 17.9%. 36 teams of the however many this is, have reached the playoffs. So, and look, there's no good teams. There's no good teams in the AFC this year. There's nobody. And yeah, okay, people are going to come back with me the Bills. I still, believe it or not, don't 100% believe in the Bills.
But that's the other thing too, is not to get too ahead of ourselves, but if the Patriots can go on a run here and get into the dance, there's really not a ton of teams, at least on right away, that scare you. Buffalo does scare me. Kansas City, I think, is going to turn it back on eventually, and they're going to be the force that we know them to be in the playoffs, and that's going to be a tough out for whoever plays them. But when you really get into this, it's not this loaded AFC where there's one team or two teams that are just destined to meet in the AFC title game and nobody else has a chance. It's not one of those years.
No, there are no one-win teams left in the AFC. Everybody has at least 2 wins. In the NFC, let me just real quick, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 one-win teams in the NFC. So yeah, it's why, again, there's no great team. There's no, when it was the Patriots, when it was the Chiefs, nobody's run away with it. It's all right there.
Yeah, so we're saying there's a chance. Now, the chance starts this Sunday against the Los Angeles.
They got to take care of business.
They got to take care of business. They got to do what they got to do. We can talk about.
Can I give you a little breaking news here, because this is pretty relevant to the game?
Okay, go ahead.
Austin Eckler did not practice today.
Okay, so it sounds like Austin Eckler suffered some sort of hip injury in practice yesterday, or maybe on Wednesday, and has now all of a sudden gone from somebody that was going to play in this game and give the Patriots second-level linebackers, Adrian Phillips, Kyle Duggar, they were going to have their hands full with Austin Eckler. Now he probably isn't going to play in this game. You're a DNP 2 days in a row on Thursday and Friday with a hip injury. That probably means no go for Austin Eckler. So we're going to get to some of these matchups in the secondary later on in the show. I want to start on the offense side of the ball, though, with the Patriots and the Chargers defense and Brandon Staley. So a couple of things off the top about Brandon Staley and what they're doing in Los Angeles defensively that has a lot of people taking notice of what the Rams did last year and now what Staley's doing with the Chargers and what his mentor, Vic Fangio, is doing in Denver and did in Chicago before that. Fangio. So a lot of I think it's Fangio.
I'm pretty sure it's Fangio.
Fangio.
I've never heard anybody say Fangio until you just did.
Oh, well, cool. I'm a trendsetter.
Sounds cool. It sounds like Halloween-esque. Fangio.
Yeah. I think I heard it on a podcast because they do that like in a funny way. It's kind of an inside joke amongst the hosts around the NFL podcast. So maybe they just say it a little bit differently.
It's fitting for Halloween. It's got like a vampire sound to it.
Right.
I like Vic Fangio. He cooks meatballs.
So basically, with Brandon Staley, everybody assumes, because when you watch the Chargers, they start pre-snapping a lot of these too high safety looks. And this is something that's sort of taking over the NFL in the college game mostly, but now starting to trickle up to the NFL game. And that's because in college and now similarly in the NFL, you have all of these coaches, and a lot of this is analytics driven, Alex, which I know drives you nuts. But a lot of this has to do with the fact that stopping explosive passing plays through the air and generating explosive passing plays offensively is number one on everybody's to-do list now, right? Hit on those 20-plus yard plays. So what they've done in Los Angeles, both with the Rams and the Chargers, if they started to play a lot more too high safety shells, at least before the ball is snapped, and then they rotate late into different looks. But the rotation is based off of the inside receiver's route tree. So essentially what this is, and Bill Belichick gave a great explanation about this on Wednesday, is a zone match defense, which means that it's not country zone, which is, it's not spot drop. Everybody's just taking an area of the field and zoning it off. What they do is when these routes break vertically down the field, they convert it into essentially what is cover one man-to-man, right? And if the routes go underneath the defense, if those inside receivers, number 2 inside, goes underneath the defense on a short route, on a slant, on a drag, on something over the middle of the field, then they play it like standard zone. So basically the stress that it puts on the offense is that everything is a post-snap reaction, right? You're not exactly sure how the defense is going to play itself out after the snap or how the coverage is going to declare. So pretty much all of the game against this Chargers team is decided once the ball is live. So on a lot of surfaces, that sounds like a very difficult defense to go up against for a rookie quarterback who has got new weapons around him, right? And they're still trying to integrate a lot of these guys to go against a team that takes a lot of continuity and a lot of things to worry about in terms of post-snap decision-making. It's a difficult defense to go up against. But with that being said, as I wrote again in my game plan today, the pioneers of these zone match principles and these zone match coverages just so happened to be Mac Jones's two head coaches over the last 5 years, and Nick Saban and Bill Belichick. They started doing this in Cleveland in the early 90s because they were a cover 3 zone team in Cleveland to begin with, and teams were just shredding them on 4 verticals, right? They're running 4 verticals up the field, flooding the deep part of the field with only 3 guys deep, and they're having all sorts of trouble defending the seams out of single high in Cleveland. So they combined a man principle defense with a zone principle defense, and they came up with Rip Liz, right? And that's what this match coverage is that is taking over all over the place. So Mac Jones has seen it in practice in college plenty. He's seen it in practice plenty here with New England. And this is a too high pre-snap structure that the Chargers are showing you. So you get a lot of light boxes, and that's why the Chargers are 32nd in the league against the run. So to sum it all up here, I actually think in a lot of ways, this Patriots team is uniquely advantage, and this is a pretty good matchup for the Patriots offense against the Chargers, because everything the Chargers do defensively is to keep the cap on, right? They just don't want to give up the big plays. And the Patriots don't necessarily need big plays down the field in the passing game to move the football offensively. They can also go heavy, and they can put the fullback on the field. Now, we'll see if Jonnu Smith is going to play in this game. It doesn't look too good right now. But if Jonnu Smith ends up playing, and they can also go 12, and they can go 2 tight end. So the Patriots can go with heavy personnel against a defense that wants to play out of light boxes and make this a styles wins fights type of matchup when the Patriots have the football.
Yeah, this could be one of those games, and you mentioned they don't need the big plays down the field. Now that they've kind of cleaned up their red zone and high red zone issues, that's especially true. They've been much better around the goal line in recent weeks. This could be, and we saw games like that. We've seen games like this a lot in the Bill Belichick era, and it's happened in different areas, different phases of the game.
Yeah.
But the general theme of the game is basically, you know what we're going to do. We know what we're going to do. Everybody in the stands knows what we're going to do. Everybody watching at home knows what we're going to do. And we're going to keep doing it until you stop it. Like, we're going to, so in this week, I think it's the run, right? The Chargers don't really stop the run, especially between the tackles. They don't seem particularly interested in stopping the run, especially between the tackles. And I think Bill Belichick is going to see that and say, stop it. Make us do something else. Whether it's, and that could be a number of different things. It could be the Chargers allocating resources into the box to stop the run, in which case you get Mac working against a single high safety. It could be something, the Chargers simply getting up 2 or 3 scores early, and then the Patriots have to throw the ball. That's probably, if we were doing Chargers beat right now, that's what I would be saying on that side is you're probably not going to stop the run traditionally, so you need to get up big and take the run off the table. But if I'm the Patriots and I'm Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, as long as this is a close game, we're going to run the ball down your throat. We know we're going to do it. We don't really care. Until we don't think you can stop it. Until you prove you can stop it, we're just going to run the ball down your throat all day. Have fun. And I love games like that. I really love games like that because it's like mean, angry, aggressive football. I think that's the game plan this week. Just do it until they prove they can stop it. Because how many times, too, have we seen the Patriots get killed by this? Where, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, right? Where we know the Patriots are the better team, but the opponent will run for like 6 yards a carry on first down, and it supersedes everything else that happens in the game. It's just way too much to overcome. Like, I could see the Patriots being on the right side of that sort of story this week.
Right. So
I'm trying to think of an example of a game like that, and I can't off the top of my head, but you know what I'm talking about. Like, they've had
So I think the 2 things. One, I think there's a decent example, and it happens to be against the Chargers in the 2018 postseason when they in totally different coaching staff, a lot of different personnel. So I'm not saying that it just stylistically the games feel similar to me. So the week before that, the Chargers upset the Ravens in the wild card round with that quarters package, right? They were putting 7 defensive backs on the field and playing DBs at linebacker because they had to worry about the speed of Lamar Jackson. Then they came into the game against the Patriots in the divisional round. And remember that opening drive that the Patriots went on in that game where they possessed the ball for like 8 or 9 minutes right off the top of the game because they just put James Devlin on the field. They knew that the Chargers were going to put light personnel in the game, and they ran it right down their throats. This is a totally different scheme, but with what Brandon Staley was doing in Los Angeles with the Rams, I keep saying Los Angeles, it's kind of confusing, with the Rams last year, well, Joey Bosa is a really good player, right? But Joey Bosa is not Aaron Donald. And on top of that, the Rams had a lot better depth on the defensive line. So they were actually one of the best run defense teams in the NFL last year was the Rams with Staley's scheme, but they're struggling to stop the run with the Chargers out of the same type of defense. So ultimately, this is a styles win fight type of game. Like I said, they have to run the football effectively if you're the Patriots. I wouldn't be surprised if they take the ball and try to run it right down their throats for an 8 or 9 minute drive and finish in the end zone and really try to drown out this game a little bit. This feels like old school versus new school. And we've talked about this a bunch of different times in a bunch of different ways on this show about how the Patriots are building their offense to be a bully when everybody else is building their offense to throw the football. And the Chargers have built their team from the top to the bottom analytically. They have looked at it and they throw the football 65% of the time, which is the 5th highest in the league. They play these 2 deep shells on defense, at least before the ball is snapped. They play zone match. They do all these types of things that I said this on Tuesday. If football Twitter was a head coach, they'd run their team like Brandon Staley does. This is the it thing to do. If you're Brandon Staley and the Chargers, these types of approaches and these types of thinking, they go for it on 4th down a ton offensively. This is what everybody wants every NFL team to do, and the Chargers are doing it. And I think the Patriots are going to come in here and say, hey, running the football and doing things, in a different, more traditional type of way with the fullbacks and with the tight ends and going beefier and getting bigger, that is still something that we can hang our hat on against these matchups. So I'm really fascinated to see if the Patriots can run the ball early effectively enough to allow themselves to continue to run the football, right? Because if you get a couple quick drives early on trying to run the ball because you're not going anywhere on 1st and 2nd down, then the game starts to favor the Chargers a little bit more. But if you can come out of the gate and run the football effectively early and play that bully ball style of offense, then this Chargers team doesn't really have an answer to that. Now, the one last thing I wanted to mention about the Patriots, sort of philosophically here, this is a very, very big test in my mind for Mac Jones because it doesn't get more complex. It doesn't get more confusing from a post-snap processing standpoint than what he's going to face with Brandon Staley on Sunday. They rotate their coverage. It looks like it's 2 high. Then it becomes 1 high, vice versa. There's so many different things that they do after the ball is snapped to confuse quarterbacks. And when Bill Belichick goes up against rookies, you see a lot of rookies struggle with Belichick's defense because of how multiple and how complex they are in the secondary. And this is a very similar style of matchup against Brandon Staley and the Chargers. So I'm very watching this on film back early next week is going to be really telling to see how Mac Jones handles all this, because this is a PhD course in how to process coverage after the snap. Let's see if he can handle it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
Yeah, sorry.
Let's go to the offensive line here. Looking at the offensive line, I'd be shocked if it's not the same starting 5 as we saw last week. I mean, if it's not, then something weird is going on, right? I don't know why it wouldn't be, but one of those matchups that's definitely going to be key on the right side is Joey Bosa versus Mike Onwenu. But just in general, before we get into that matchup, do you think anything differently than I do about that starting 5 staying the same?
Well, it's not going to be Trent Brown. I don't know why there's like a bunch of people in the comments asking about that.
Yeah.
He hasn't practiced. He's not back. There shouldn't be any change. I can't imagine there's any change. I believe Justin Herron was still on the injury report, right? So I don't see any reason for them to mix things up. It worked last week. If they make a change, that to me is more alarming than anything.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's going to be the same 5 guys. It sounds like it's going to be a big Damian Harris, probably a big Jakob Johnson game. Depending on what happens, I would say with the 2 tight ends with Jonnu, if he's going to be healthy enough to play in this game or not. It's going to be a big run game, I would say. And then when you get into the passing game, as Brian Hoyer said to us yesterday, you got to take what's there. Right? This is not a defense that you want to hang in the pocket for a while, let Bosa come after you, try to push the football down the field. Take what's there, take the checkdowns, take the short throws, because more times than not, that's what this defense is going to give you. They're not going to give you too many of the plays over the top.
Well, and Mac's the guy for that, right? What does he always say? Don't go broke. You don't need to go broke taking a profit or whatever it is.
Right.
You never go broke taking a profit, something like that. I think I didn't mean to offend you guys. Just let you know, Trent Brown's not playing now. See, now I'm getting it. This is why I try not to engage with the chat. It kind of feels like that. As weird as this sounds, as much as we were bemoaning what the offensive scheme was early in the year, right? It kind of feels like this is the game you maybe want to go with that approach, because that's what the Chargers, they're disinterested with stopping that offense because the analytics are dumb. And
okay, so if you want to do this,
do you think the Chargers are interested in stopping 5-yard slant routes?
Okay, so this is what I think.
Staley is like working on stopping 5-yard slant routes.
No, okay, this is what I think about the Chargers' stylistic approach. I believe that over the course of a 17-game season, the Chargers' approach is going to win them a lot of football games. But the problem that they have is that from an analytics perspective, pretty much everything that we talk about with football analytics, except for decisions to go for it on 4th down and stuff like that. But talking about the stylistic, how to build your team, how to build your scheme, all of this is big picture, looking at it from a bird's eye view. Let's look at over the course of 17 games, what's going to win out more, right? And that is this 2 deep, play coverage on the back end, make sure you don't give up explosive passing plays. But when you get into these individual matchups, that's when it can be a little bit problematic. But there's just so few teams in the NFL that carry 2 productive tight ends and a fullback and a big off, the way the Patriots are built, right? The Patriots are the dinosaur here. So for 1 in every 17 games that the Chargers are going to face a team like the Patriots, it obviously makes more sense for them to build their team for everybody else, what everybody else is doing. But the Patriots, as you've said to Alex, everybody else is zigging, they're zagging, and now is the real litmus test of if that approach is going to work in the long run for the Pats. Because if they can't run the football against the Chargers defense that has given up rushing yards of 100, and they've given up over 160 yards a game on the ground. Right. Last week, 2 weeks ago, before their bye week, Baltimore ran all over them. Cleveland ran for over 200 yards against this team in week 5. All of these teams that can run the football effectively, Cleveland, Dallas, Baltimore, that have been on the Chargers schedule, have destroyed them in the ground game. But like you said, the Chargers know it's coming. The Patriots know what they're going to do. And now it's just going to come down to individual matchups, man on man, who's going to be the more physical football team.
And that's where the math is dumb. That's where the math ruins things for me, because with and this is what Bill Belichick has said, right? When we've asked him about this in the past, is he says, I don't need some random play from 1984 dictating what I'm going to do now, because that's what it is, right? The probabilities are based on historical events.
Well, really what it comes down to is that if you look at the numbers and you look at the way that that the metrics work, if you give up 1 passing play of over 20 plus yards on a drive, the odds of you giving up points, at least a field goal on that drive, is something like 75 to 80%. If you give up 2 explosive passing plays, let me finish. If you have 2 explosive passing plays, 2 plays at 20 plus yards in the same drive, teams are scoring touchdowns over 90% of the time when they get 2 explosives. So that's the thing, is that giving up explosive plays directly correlates to giving up points.
Great. That's awesome. If you need math to tell you that big plays lead to touchdowns, you shouldn't be in football. Like, that's what I've known that since I was about 6 years old. I didn't need a damn calculator to figure that out. What my point is, all right, so 80% of the time that works. What happens that other 20% of the time? Is your team built like the 80% of teams that made that stops? Do you have somebody or not have somebody that changes the circumstances? Every game is unique. Every snap is unique. That is and that is how I think. I'm really excited to see Bill Belichick do it this weekend. That is how you take advantage of these analytics teams. They're built basically on just the most probable outcome. And that at a certain point, you can dictate what happens, right? So like you said, the Chargers are built because most of the time, the big play, if there's a big play or 2 big plays on a drive, it results in a touchdown. That is true. But the Chargers are built on that definitively. And that's not definitive, okay? Malcolm Butler got the interception in Super Bowl 49. I know the math says he didn't do it. But the eye test tells me he's done it. I've seen the video of it.
They're built to stop Kansas City. They're built to stop Buffalo. They're built to stop Tampa Bay. They're built to stop these teams that are putting up all these points in the NFL with a deep passing game. That's what they're built to stop.
So here's my point. And they're all going to cancel each other out. That's what I love about this Patriots team so much, is they're outside that bubble. They exist outside,
but this is a game. This is you and Bill Belichick's game, right? If they can't get it done here, if they can't run the football, then everything that you and Bill have told me over the last 6 months goes out. This is the matchup that they need to be able to actually be the bully that they built, right, in the offseason. Because if they get into a drop-back passing game against this Chargers defense and they try to get Mac to go toe-to-toe with Justin Herbert in a shootout, the Patriots are not going to win that type of game, right? They're not going to win. They just had it happen to them against Dallas, and look at what happened, right? The more talented passing game won out in the end. So if the Patriots are going to build their team like this, I'm all for it, because I can see from a league-wide perspective that they're zigging when everybody else is zagging. They're going to put the fullback in the field. They're going to put their 2 tight ends out there against light personnel, against light boxes, and they're going to run the ball for 6 yards a carry. That's great if they can actually go out there and do it on Sunday.
Well, that's the beauty of it. It comes down to execution. The math doesn't matter. This is why I'm going on this rant, right? Because the math, the point I was making is that, and this isn't so much about this game. This is just me going off on the math in general. This is just a good week to do it. The and this is across all sports: baseball, hockey, football, basketball, whatever. The math works better the more teams that buy in. If you're the only team in the league using an analytics approach, you're going to struggle more. Because, again, it's based on what is the most common outcome. So if everybody else is driving towards that most common outcome, you're going to see that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're going to see that most common outcome happen more, and boom, you can dig deeper and deeper into your spreadsheets like a freaking nerd, all right? When you're outside that bubble, the Patriots, this is the biggest advantage for the Patriots in this game. It's not just literally they can run the ball against a team that's disinterested in stopping the run, and they can throw underneath against a team that's disinterested in stopping passes underneath. Right. They can dictate the flow of this game. The Chargers will go in planning for the typical game flow because they have to, because that's what the math tells them. The Patriots
you're upsetting the nerds. I love it.
The Patriots, good. The Patriots can change things up. The Patriots aren't married to, well, in 98% of games on 1st and 10. No, they can do what they want because they look at each situation as its own individual situation. And it's just much more effective to do that.
Okay, well, it's going to be fascinating because this is a true, like I keep saying, This is a true styles win fight type of game where the Patriots have been built offensively to expose the defense just like this. The Chargers defense in DVOA, they're 32nd in the league against the run, dead last as a defense against the run. And DVOA against short passes, throws under 15 yards, they're 21st in the league. So they don't stop the short pass well, and they don't stop the run well. Well, that sounds like a team that the Patriots are perfectly built to put points up against. Let's see it. Let's see it on Sunday, right? There's no excuse now to not be able to run the football, not be able to run their style of offense, and we'll see what happens. Let's move over to the other side of the football as my hair is just deciding to go crazy right now. Let's move over to the other side of the football. Talk about Justin Herbert, because as fun as this matchup is between Brandon Staley and Josh McDaniels and Mac Jones, Justin Herbert's pretty darn good too, Alex. So we have to talk about the Chargers offense and how the Patriots are going to stop it. Similarly to the conversation that we just had, the Chargers throw the football the fifth most on a percentage basis in the NFL. Over 65% of the time they throw the ball. Now, if I had Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, I'd probably throw the ball 65% of the time too. But
especially if Austin Eckler's out.
Right. So point being, the Patriots, just like they're going to know how the game is going to be played on offense when they have the football, they know how the game is going to be played on offense when the Chargers have the football too. Now it's just going to come down to who can win out, right? Which side can execute better. So when you look at the Chargers, their pass protection is still not very good. Last year, 11 quarterback hits, 3 sacks on Justin Herbert. And a few weeks ago against Baltimore in the Chargers' last game, Herbert was under pressure a good amount from that Baltimore defense, and that seemed to rattle him. It rattled him in the matchup against the Pats last year, and rattled him a couple weeks ago against Baltimore. Those are probably his 2 worst games as a professional. They scored 6 points against the Ravens in that loss a couple weeks ago. I believe their opening drive touchdown was the only score that they had in the entire game. And then the Patriots shut him out last year. 2 very, very different ways they got there. Baltimore blitzed, and they put a lot of heavy emphasis on the pass protection and knowing your rules and knowing your assignments, and they exposed that offensive line with blitzing. The Patriots a year ago, they went with more of a coverage plan. It forced Herbert to hold the football and then allowed the pass rush to get home from there. So whether they play coverage or they blitz again like Baltimore did, getting pressure on Herbert is the ultimate key, because if you let this guy just sit there, back there in the pocket, he's going to put up 400 yards against the secondary, just like Dak Prescott did a few weeks ago.
Yeah, again, the numbers from last year, right? The game last year, they pressured him, or they hit him. Sorry, they hit him 11 times. I don't have the pressure number, but it's higher than that.
They hit him 11%, which for a pocket,
35%. Okay,
that's a high percentage for an offense that's getting the ball out.
I mean, 11 hits is pretty high too. What's the average in a game? Like 5 or 6, probably quarterback hits, if that. Yeah. They hit him 11 times. Only game in his NFL career where he's failed to throw a touchdown. Lowest passer rating of his career. I mean, they beat the crap out of him. It's what they did. So you look at it and you say, okay, what did they do that last year that they can duplicate and do again this year? And like you mentioned, they didn't necessarily get that pressure blitzing a ton. I think they blitzed strategically. I think not that they called a lot of blitzes, but I thought the blitzes they called were very impactful in the moments they called them. So that's something you go back to. But I look at it, the offensive line is upgraded. It's better. I still don't think it's great. I certainly wouldn't put it in the top half of the league, especially at the tackles. Christian Darrisaw's still a rookie. On the other side, and I'm blanking on the name right now, the right tackle. You want to help me out, or are you?
I'll pull it up. I'm blanking off. Okay. Of course.
It's like week 8. I'm already forgetting names. It's so bad. Yeah. Anyway, he's making. I don't know his name, but I can tell you he's making his.
Storm. How did I forget Storm Norton?
Storm Norton. I knew it was a good name
to remember. And it's also Rashawn Slater at left tackle.
Rashawn Slater, exactly. Not Christian Darrisaw. I'm back in draft mode.
Yeah.
Anyway,
another rookie.
You have Rashawn Slater on one side. He's a rookie. You have Storm Norton on the other side. He's making his 8th career NFL start. These are not experienced players, and Matt Judon should be able to feast on these guys. And I assume they're going to move him a little bit back and forth as they have at times this year. It's a big game for Matt Judon. This is a big, big game for Matt Judon, because even though he hasn't gotten a sack the last 2 weeks, right? He had a sack the first, whatever it was, 4 games, 5 games. He hasn't gotten a sack the last 2 weeks, but since then, he's still been very good. I think he's still. I thought his performance against Dallas was underrated. I thought he got in Dak's face a good amount, moved him off the spot, even if he never hit him. He's drawn some holding calls. There's been some other plays that probably should have been holding calls that weren't. So I think this is a big game for Matt Judon to get in there and really make Justin Herbert uncomfortable. Because if they make him uncomfortable, like you said, we saw it last week. We saw it in this matchup last year. That's how you get to him. You have to get him off his spot. And I guess not just get him off his spot, because he can move around and throw on the run. It's a really fine line of, you have to make him uncomfortable in the pocket. You want to kind of give him happy feet. You want him moving his feet, but you don't want him running. Right.
So it's an interesting matchup in terms of what I'm seeing from their protection, because so Corey Linsley's their center. He's a veteran center. When he was
their interior offensive line's better.
Yeah, when he was in Green Bay, he made all the calls for Aaron Rodgers, right? He was the guy that made all the protection calls, 4 down, 3 down, get them in the right protection. Rodgers would tweak things here and there, quality control type of stuff. But for the most part, Corey Linsley called the protections. But Corey Linsley's new to this system. Justin Herbert's new to Joe Lombardi's system as well. It's a New Orleans-based scheme. It's similar to what Sean Payton's running with the Saints. But these are all guys that are in their first years in this system. So I wonder, because, Lombardi's a new OC with Brandon Staley coming over. So a lot of the breakdowns that I saw a couple weeks ago against Baltimore were on not necessarily all-out 5-6-man pressure, but more of those simulated pressures that we talk about all the time with Bill Belichick, where they show 6 guys up on the line of scrimmage like they're going to bring the house, but they only end up bringing 4, and you as a offensive line need to decipher which 4 are coming and which 4 are dropping, and then how to pick everybody up, right? And I think when you stress that protection and those rules with an offensive line and a quarterback that are learning a new system and might not necessarily know every check and know every call and know every answer that they have in their back pocket to a protection, that might be explain why Baltimore was able to get home, because they had a lot of just unblocked guys to the quarterback, right? Just free runners at the QB, off the edge especially, where they were just left wide open, right? So I think that there's a lot of coverage or protection breakdowns there from a communication standpoint of who has who and when. The Patriots love to run their simulated pressure package. Now, Baltimore does it a little bit differently than they do. They run more zero pressure than the Patriots do nowadays. But the Patriots will play that single high. They'll put 6 guys up on the line of scrimmage, and then you have to decipher which 4 are coming. And sometimes it's a different 4 every single time. They try to really change it up. They have rules based off of the way the offensive line slides, who's going to go and who's going to drop into coverage. So that to me is the game plan here. It's still to leave 7 guys in coverage, because I think if you take guys out of coverage too often and you don't get home with the pass rush, then Justin Herbert's going to pick you apart with more space open on the back end. But if you can get home with 4 by simulating the rush and confusing that offensive line up front, then Herbert he's got a good PFF grade and all that kind of stuff under pressure. But the only way to stop this offense, because they have so many weapons to really stop it, is to disrupt it, right? You got to be more physical and you got to disrupt it. So that's going to be the key, is to get to Justin Herbert. And I feel like you face a great quarterback like Herbert or Dak or Brady, and that's always the key. Right. It's always the key is to get home. The question is how are you going to go about doing it? Are you going to blitz? Are you going to play coverage and hope he holds the football? Are you going to do some different things with your 4-man rush to confuse the offensive line? This feels like a coverage, do things to confuse the offensive line, but don't actually pull guys out type of game plan.
So, yeah, I think there's 2 key differences between this game, because we kept talking about how the Bucs and Cowboys game plans are going to be similar, right? Defensively. Yeah. I think there's 2 key differences here. One helps the Patriots, one hurts the Patriots. I think the one that helps is this isn't the same offensive line, right? It's not, Dallas is one of the best offensive lines in the league. The Tampa offensive line's pretty good. Right. And super rudimentary, elementary way to put it. But you're good, the kind of pressure you'll get sending 5 or 6, just to pull arbitrary numbers out. The kind of pressure you'll get sending 5 or 6 against Dallas, you might get sending just 4 against the Chargers. Yeah. Just because of again, I know that's super rudimentary, but
he can also move around. around, right? So you have to factor that in.
Dak can move around too.
No, but my point being is one of the hardest things to do, and Matt Judon talked about this on that sack last week by Miles Bryant on the slot blitz, right? One of the hardest things to do with Justin Herbert is to actually get him on the ground because he's 6'5", right. 6'6", and he can move around back there. So if you're a free runner at the quarterback on like a slot blitz or a safety pressure or something like that, that's all well and good. But if he just spins out of it or something like that or gets on the run, then he can just kill you with his arm on the move. So it's a difficult game plan to just say, let's pin our ears back and blitz 5 or 6 guys all the time, because especially the way this Patriots secondary has played of late, I'm not too keen on the idea of pulling guys out of coverage to add them into the rush, right? It just doesn't feel like the Patriots have the horses, and we're going to get into the matchups here in a second with the secondary. It doesn't feel like they have the horses to match up against Allen and Williams and Cook. And if Austin Eckler doesn't play in this game, that certainly helps a little bit because he's a dynamic receiver. But it doesn't necessarily feel like the Patriots have the bodies to be able to come with a real blitz game plan here. This definitely feels like they have to keep 7 in coverage as often as they can.
Yeah, not a big week to blitz. So the other thing I would say that's different from the Tampa and in the Dallas games is, remember we talked about specifically with Tampa, drop everybody into coverage, make them run the ball, right? If they see everybody back there, Brady will check out and run. He'll take what's given to him. I don't think the Chargers are going to do that, especially if they don't have Austin Eckler. They'll throw into defenses you as the Patriots probably want them to throw into. And some of that is they can get away with it with Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, right? But they're not going to – this is right with Belichick. It's we're not going to let you beat us with what you do best. And so for the Cowboys, for the Bucs, it's we'll let you run the ball because we think you're more dangerous throwing the ball. The Chargers will say, they'll just put the blinders on and say, screw that. We're still going to throw. We don't care that you're giving us the run. Again, especially if Eckler's out. So that's a different element to it as well, where the Patriots were able to hide some of the warts in the secondary by kind of allowing, they put more resources towards covering the pass and kind of didn't worry about the run as much. You can do that this week, but I don't know that it's going to pay off in the way it did in those games.
It feels like a pretty one-dimensional Charger offense, to be honest with you. I'm not really too worried about their run game. I think the Patriots can handle stopping their run if they'll just make the tackle. As Belichick said on the sideline in that mic'd up segment last week, he said, we got to get to the quarterback and we'll just make the tackle if they decide to run the ball, right? And that sort of feels like this is that type of game as well. And lastly, before we talk about these specific matchups at the end here, it also just kind of feels like a game. Now, of course, all right. You got on the other side of the football that the Chargers playing these 2 deep shells. They're trying to take away explosive plays, that whole conversation. The Patriots are, even though their secondary is banged up and they're maybe not as strong there as we initially thought going into the season, the goal of this team from the Patriots perspective is to be able to put lighter personnel on the field as well to a degree and be able to stop some of these higher powered passing attacks with those numbers in the secondary. So I look at this game from a Patriots point of view, and I see dime defense. I see Josh Uche playing a lot more than maybe we've seen in past weeks. And I see them going out there and really daring the Chargers to run the football as well and take the ball out of Herbert's hand that way a little bit too. So the Patriots stylistically do it differently. They do it with their single high structures, with their cover 1 man and 3 and stuff like that. But they also get a little bit of this sort of give and take as well, that they want to be a team that can stop the pass out of these formations too. So I expect them to basically live with whatever they give up on the ground in this game. I think Josh Uche should play a ton. Matt Judon's obviously going to play a ton. I don't think this is necessarily a huge Jawan Bentley style of game, right? I'd probably rather Adrian Phillips and Kyle Duggar playing in the box to worry about the pass and then make the tackle against the run. Looking at these matchups, though.
Well, how about Jamie Collins?
Yeah, Jamie Collins has been playing a ton on passing downs, right? That's basically his role. Is he takes Bentley and Hightower and some of these guys off the field that are less athletic in passing situations, and he's been 25% of the snaps last week, 20% of the snaps the week before. essentially exclusively in the passing game because they look at him as a more athletic player, whether he's blitzing or he's playing in coverage than Van Noy, Bentley, Hightower, some of their bigger linebackers.
Right. Just like classic Jamie Collins. No, I think having that, I would say too, he gives them, and I guess I'm probably saying the same thing you said, I'm just wording it differently.
Yeah.
He gives them more of that east to west coverage than a guy like Adante Hightower, Juwan Bentley does. I don't know that they have another true east-west linebacker on the roster right now. I thought it maybe could have been Raekwon McMillan early on in camp. Obviously, he got hurt. Terez Hall, whenever he comes back, will add some of that. But I think I think Collins is their best east to west linebacker right now. And again, you need, with a quarterback like Justin Herbert, you need an east to west linebacker.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a game for Collins, Duggar in the box, Phillips in the box, maybe even have 4 safeties out there, depending on what you want to call Miles Bryant, right?
Or what do you call Adrian Phillips, too?
Yeah, right. So I would say that this is a big game for that Phillips, Bryant, McCourty, Duggar, Mills, and J.C. Jackson group. Those 6 guys, I think, are going to be out on the field a ton because, remember, the Chargers, Guyton's a decent number 3 receiver, but they're not really a team that has 3 wide receivers that really scare you, right? So I don't know if they have to play traditional nickel or dime defense with a 3rd corner out there. They might be able to just avoid the 3rd corner spot altogether in a game like this. Talking about these matchups in the secondary for the Patriots, Bill Belichick in the past has done this a ton, and I feel like this is going to be one of those games where we might see Jalen Mills with help on Keenan Allen and J.C. Jackson just get Mike Williams by himself because J.C. traveling inside with with Keenan Allen and trying to cover a guy that's that good of a route runner, that's that quick at the top of the route, gets open on in breakers. It's just not a great matchup for JC. It's not really what he's best at. We've seen guys like that, like Diggs, who's awesome anyways, but we've seen some of these receivers that are quicker, shiftier guys that can run routes from inside, give JC Jackson some problems. So if Keenan Allen travels inside, then it's super easy once he goes inside to bracket him with the linebacker level and the safeties, right? You can bracket him. Right. You can give robber help. You can give second level help. You can do all sorts of easy things there to help Jalen Mills out. And then I'll take my licks if JC Jackson gives up a few big plays down the field to Mike Williams. You kind of have to live with those.
Yeah. You only have so many resources. It's not
right.
You just don't have, we talked about this on Tuesday. They used to be able to pull out this blanket coverage because they had Stephon Gilmore, Jason McCourty, JC Jackson, Devin McCourty, Daron Harmon. Like you don't have the personnel for that anymore. Yeah. Given the group they have, that's probably the best bet. And this is where you find out too. This is a game, if they go with the game plan that you just suggested, which I think they will.
Yeah.
This is a game I guarantee you we'll talk a lot about in January and February. Because when we're talking about, well, do they pay J.C. Jackson like a true number 1 corner? This is a game that will probably come up during those negotiations and for us when we talk about it, because if he shuts out Mike Williams without help, there you go. It's kind of what you want your number 1 corner to do.
Yeah, it feels like the rest of the way for the Patriots, just knowing that Stephon Gilmore is not walking through the door, that the old Belichick trick of doubling the number 1 guy, I don't want to call it doubling because no one actually gets doubled all that much in the NFL, but putting the number 2 corner on the number 1 guy with help, and then putting J.C. Jackson on the number 2 receiver on the boundary. So that feels like maybe the formula for the Patriots moving forward. Yeah. And it kind of takes me back to the pre-Gilmore, post-Revis Patriots, the 15-16 teams with Malcolm Butler. I feel like Malcolm Butler did that a lot, right? Where they had Malcolm Butler on the number 2 guy on his own, and they had was it Logan Ryan at the time or whoever the number 2
probably would have been Logan Ryan.
Yeah.
I'll look. I feel like we're missing
with the help, right? With getting all the help.
I guess it was Razai Dowling the one game he played.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so that feels like a decent way to go about this the rest of the way. Now, obviously there's going to be certain matchups where the number 1 guy, quote unquote, is just a good matchup for JC, and they're just going to want to put him out there, right? If it's Devontae Parker, if it's trying to think of some of their other matchups coming up here. Those types of guys.
By the way, it was Logan Ryan one year and then Eric Rowe the next year.
Right. So that was, if I remember correctly, outside of one game that's sticking out in my head when they put Malcolm Butler on Antonio Brown.
Because he'd always owned Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
He just had that matchup.
Yeah. The rest of the games in those 2 seasons, and Belichick had been doing that for a while because they did this with Ty Law a ton too, right? Where they gave Ty Law the number 2 on an island with the number 1 getting bracketed or getting
except against the Colts.
Except against the Colts.
Because he just owned Marvin Harrison. There's weird things in football where certain corners just own certain receivers and vice versa. There's certain receivers that you kind of throw what we think of as the skill level out. Not that Marvin Harrison is better than Ty Law, but it's more Malcolm. Like Antonio Brown's a better receiver than Malcolm Butler as a corner, but Malcolm Butler just owned him. Like it was just this weird thing. Like Devon Best used to kill the Patriots. It was just like this weird thing where anyway, I always find those fascinating. Like who specifically owns who.
Yeah. So back in the day, this was more common with Belichick, but then once he got Revis and Gilmore and Talib, those guys started to take the number 1, Gilmore especially in recent years, that he would take the number 1 guy every week, right? I mean, the Patriots are playing the Chargers this week with Stephon Gilmore. Then,
by the way, quick update, Eckler questionable.
Okay, so that's the other element of this. Just Jared Cook and Austin Eckler, depending on if Eckler is out there or not, those are the 2 guys that do worry you a little bit in this matchup, especially a guy like Eckler. Now, if the Patriots play this game out of that 6 DB package that I mentioned, then maybe a guy like Adrian Phillips or Kyle Duggar kind of switch off on Cook and Eckler, and they don't actually ever put a linebacker anywhere near Austin Eckler. But you do have to worry about on 1st and 2nd down, if you have guys like Bentley, if you have guys like Hightower, if you have guys like Van Noy out there in space with Austin Eckler, that's going to be a not good development for the Patriots. So avoiding that thing is important, and that's kind of why I feel like this will probably be a pretty heavy man coverage game for New England so that they can make sure that they dictate the matchups.
Yeah. I know we're up against it, so I don't know if you have any more points. I don't want to run over.
No, I don't think we have any more. Jared Cook against Kyle Duggar is going to be an interesting one. Cook he's up there in age, but he can still play.
Savvy veteran.
He can still run. And he plays a lot detached from the formation, too. It's not a whole lot of inline traditional tight end stuff. It's mostly out of the slot and a little bit out wide. I would actually venture to say that he's flexed out more than he has his hand in the dirt in general. So it's going to be an interesting game because some of these guys, if you're helping with Keenan Allen, like you said, you only have so many resources. So Cook, Mike Williams, these guys are going to be in their 3rd receiver. Those guys are going to be one-on-one a lot of this game with the Patriots DBs. It's going to be interesting to see how New England matches up. But Alex, we're going to come back on the show on Tuesday, and you're either going to be able to throw the biggest parade against the nerds that you've ever thrown on this show, or Brandon Staley and the analytics gurus are going to get the better of the Patriots.
Well, we'll see. I feel pretty good. Like, again, I don't know. Because my whole point is ultimately comes down to talent. And the Chargers might have more roster talent than the Patriots.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'd like to see, chance to kick a game-tying field goal 4th and 1 from the 5-yard line. They go for it. They don't get it. I would love to see some of that. They're definitely a team that will be aggressive on 4th down. This is the antithesis of the Patriots, right? This is the total opposite. They're an aggressive 4th down play calling team. They're a zone match, 2-high team. They don't care about stopping the run. They love to throw the football all over the place. It's going to be really fun to see which style wins out in this game because whoever dictates the terms of the game is going to win this one pretty easily, I think. Right. And like I said, I think the Patriots have a better ability to dictate the tone of the game because there's certain elements of the game the Chargers just won't acknowledge.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, we're going to be back on the show on Tuesday. Really quickly, Alex, trade deadline on Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern. Not expecting any fireworks necessarily from the Patriots, but Bill Belichick's always got things up his sleeve.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I know I saw some people say Deshaun Jackson. I love it. I've always been a Deshaun Jackson fan. I've always wanted the Patriots to get him. Evan, as you've pointed out, There have been times when they could have got him, they didn't.
He's been sitting there as a free agent forever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's been times where he's just been open and available for any team to call him, and the Patriots have not come calling.
If I'm as much as I love Deshaun Jackson, as much as I love Brandon Cooks, really two of my favorite receivers in the league, if we're being honest. I know they kind of need a corner, but just all things considered, financials, everything. If they were going to go for a player at the deadline, I would hope it's Marlon Mack. That would be, if I could pick one guy who's expected to be available. I still think they need another body at the running back position. I think a pass catching running back would help this team a ton. I ultimately don't, if they make a move, it's a minor move, right? Where they trade Isaiah Ford for conditional 7th last year, and he never played. If they make a move, it's probably something like that. But if I could pick one guy that's going to be available to deadline, I'd go with Marlon Mack.
Yeah. So we'll have a deadline show on Tuesday. We'll also recap this Patriots-Chargers game on Tuesday as well, but we're going to record after the 4 p.m. Eastern deadline on Tuesday. So if the Patriots do make a move, keep it right here on Patriots Beat and on Patriots CLNS and Pat's Press Pass, because we will have you covered on trade deadline day on Tuesday, and then the Carolina Panthers next weekend. Hopefully the Patriots have got some more momentum with an upset win in LA. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. And a happy Halloween out there to everybody as well. Enjoy yourselves on Sunday this weekend. Be safe, and we'll see you guys Tuesday. Thanks for watching, everybody.